think we're all good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 1st, and the time is now 5:02. With me this evening, I have Board Secretary Godfrey Azima, Board Member Mary Ellen Flaherty. We have Ralph Valenzizi, who will be leading the meeting this evening, Lunda Asmani, Barbara Namani, and guests this evening that are here with us tonight. With that being said, our first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Were you both, Mary Ellen and Godfrey, able to read those minutes? Any changes or corrections?
Yes, there are a couple things.
Go ahead.
Can I just start out? Well,
Yes.
on page 3, shall I go in order or the most important thing first?
I would go in order so that the person
Alright.
taking the notes.
So it's pretty minor. On page 2, it's he, 2 capital letters. It just should be capital H and then small e. Also on page 2, there's a line that says credit online courses, and the next word should be remote, and it says repot.
Repot. I caught that one.
And then page 3, the last page, this is a big one. The last sentence is a big change that students who are tardy to be marked absent. The not
To
has
be
been
marked.
omitted. To not be marked absent is correct. Right, Ralph?
Yes, correct.
Thank you, Ralph. Godfrey, did you have any other changes or updates?
Nothing different from Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen.
Okay.
All right, with that being said, I didn't see any other, actually, you had one more than what I had. But so motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion.
Okay, Mary Ellen. Godfrey, second. Okay, all in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous vote on the minutes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. I did not see any emails. I don't know if there's anybody online. No?
No, there's not. And yeah, Maura did send over a note that there were no emails. So
Okay, thank you very much. So this evening, we'll be reviewing all 4,000, 5,000, some 2,000 and 9,000 policies. And I can speak this evening. Wow. I am going to pass the meeting over to Ralph Valenzizi.
oh, great. No, thanks, Diana. And yeah, good evening, everybody. We're happy to have you all here. Thank you, Linda and Barbara, for being on, and as well as Joanne and Jennifer, who are going to talk about our medication policy in just a moment. So tonight we'll be reviewing, to begin, a policy that we talked about quickly with Linda, which is our purchasing policy. Once again, this is in place, and if we remember, this is actually a policy that was adopted last year in the spring. So we just want to make sure it's readopted because it's actually already been, in a sense, updated, and Linda will explain that quickly for you guys. And then the other policies are a continuation of updates, the annual updates from our model policies. So we'll go through those as soon as Linda's done with the purchasing policy. So Linda, I'll turn it over to you to just talk us through the purchasing policy itself.
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see this?
We can see your desktop. I think you have to flip them.
Okay, let me see. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So again, as Ralph mentioned, we presented the finance policy and it was approved in last year, earlier this year. But then in the series of finance policies, purchasing policy update, we adopted a policy kind of superseding the one that was adopted prior. And so we just want to make sure that the policy on record is back to this one. If you recall, back in 2011, and Tom Hamilton had started this work, we, in the process of undergoing an audit, there were some audit recommendations that we update our existing policy to take into account certain federal requirements because we were recipients of federal grants. So we had made those changes. And then in the process, we had also updated some limits just to take account of inflation, the cost of doing business. So we had raised the limits for quotations from 3,500 to 10,000, and then the RFP and bids from 7,500 to 20,000. And so these policies had already been approved and implemented, and we just want to make sure that they are re-adopted again because the policy that you had adopted a couple of months ago kind of overrode this one. So we just want to make sure that we have the most current policy in place. We were asked at some point early this summer by the state to see if we had actually met these requirements. And so this is actually the policy that we had sent over to the state. So this is the one that they have. And so we just want to make sure that the state and the Board of Ed, we're both operating under the same policy. But really, those there aren't many changes between this one and that one, other than just an update on the limits and making sure that some of this federal language is included in the policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, but there have been no changes to the policy that was already.
Linda, I just want to restate it and tell me if I'm understanding you correctly. That when we worked on this with consideration of the federal requirements, when we did that sometime in the spring, and then during the summer, we adopted the state policies as a group. And we like this one that we did in the spring because it was really customized to our needs and our federal needs. And so that's the one you're talking about, the one that we designed or put together earlier in the year.
Yes, because there were specific items that were highlighted in the audit that they wanted included, which we did, to your point, we customized that. And then in this year's audit, there was a question as to whether we had made the recommendations, and we responded that we did, and we provided them this policy.
Yes.
Doing that. So we just want to make sure that we're all operating under the same document.
Okay, I understand.
Godfrey, anything? I'm good on my end.
I'm good on my end.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So then with our Linda, I know that you were, if you need to jump off then and get over here to the board meeting, that's great. I'll see you soon. The next thing that we're going to go into right now are actually our model policy changes. I'm going to let Joanne and Jennifer talk for a moment on the administration of medication and some of the changes that occurred with this and in the adoption of our update to our policy. I'll actually talk about items B, the employee use of district computers, item E and item F. And Barbara will get a chance to talk a little bit about items C and D, review those for us. So with that, Joanne and Jennifer, let me turn it over to you. And would you like me to pull up the policy, or would you just rather talk through it? Some of the changes, I can actually put up the shipment and Goodwin updates if that helps.
It's fine. There really isn't that many updates, actually. It's just the format that changed, except for the naloxone, which is letter D as in Edward, the one that's italicized. Naloxone for the purposes of emergency first aid. Most of these policy, all of this policy is not new. This has always been our policy. The format is very different, and it's much more user-friendly, and it's easily readable compared to what we had before under the CABE plan. This is much nicer that Shipman and Goodwin did. The newest part of this is the naloxone, which I'm going to ask you to refer to that. It's letter E as in Edward, it talks about naloxone for the purposes of emergency first aid. And this is basically a law that came out that says pursuant to the standing order of the board's medical advisor and authorization from the superintendent of school in accordance with the Connecticut state law. And this policy, a school nurse may maintain naloxone for the purpose of administering emergency first aid to students who experience a known or suspected opioid overdose. And then it goes to small letter A. Talks about the school nurse in consultation with the board's medical advisor shall determine the supply of naloxone that shall be maintained in the individual schools. We have naloxone in every single one of our schools. Initially with this, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background. This goes back actually to 2017, I believe. They started talking about this on the state level, about having this in all the schools, but nothing really came into play. So Dr. Weinberger, in consultation with our medical advisor, I said, and considering the trends of what was happening in every community across the United States and how these young children were dying. Oh, gee, hold on one second. The lights go out in here. I have to just get up. It's all motion. There we go. Sorry. That we thought that we could institute and have a standing order and put this in our schools just in case. So this dates back to Dr. Adamowski and Frank Costanzo. So we did have a standing order for to have that in our high school and our middle schools only at that time. As the trends have progressed, you can see that we decided, and along with this policy under E, it talks about the safe storage of naloxone. It talks about the responsibility for maintaining an inventory, etc. Okay, so right now I'm on letter C, and we do have that. We've expanded this to every single school because this doesn't really affect, when you really think about it, it could be any staff member. It could be a parent that walks in to a school. So under Dr. Weinberger's standing order, it definitely states, and this is part of our procedural guidelines and protocols, which doesn't need to be in the policy, but this is how we function as school nurses. It's for individuals at Norwalk Public Schools on school grounds. So for example, supposing you have, if I can just elaborate a little bit on this, supposing you have an extracurricular thing at night or like a dance at Norwalk High or something, that's really not school. Do you know what I'm saying? During the school day. So you may not have school nurses. So we ended up this year and actually last year taking it to another level and having our security guards trained as well. And they also have that in the schools. And everybody goes through this training that's put out by Hub, which is one of our partners. It's excellent. It's also for the lay person. We have a lot of teachers. We have principals. Whoever wants to, it's open to the public actually on how to give naloxone. And then they give us the free Narcan, the free naloxone, which is great. And so we have that in all of our schools. So the nurse is responsible really for maintaining the inventory. And then we provide, if we had to ever give it, thank goodness, so far, we have never had to do that, but we came very close. And I'm sure you saw that in January at Brian McMahon. I was actually the nurse that was there that day. And we came very, very close to giving naloxone. We didn't have to, but came very close to it. We had ambulance, we had our SRO officers, etc. So it's really to provide safety, not just for our students, but for anybody else that requires it. So we can administer it, like I said, as well as anybody else who's had training. So that would be other individuals in our district, security guards, and I said this before, our teachers. Again, this is for on school grounds. So we don't take this on field trips. Okay, that's the difference. It's very specific. And then if it's given, we have a whole protocol on who you notify, the superintendent, obviously the parents, the kid goes to the hospital or the person goes to the hospital. and Dr. Weinberger is notified. And then we have a report of Lennox-Sloan administration. So this has to be filed also. And we keep a copy of this in the student's record. And then we also keep a copy for the state of Connecticut as well. So thank goodness we've never had to use it, but I feel it's very, very important that we have this because considering what's come out, I don't know if you've seen the news, but it almost looks like candy. And these little things are laced with fentanyl opioids, and the kids think it's candy. You have no idea. And the person that ended up ingesting some of this last year had no idea that what she had could have been fentanyl, because she would never have done that if she knew that. So, I mean, this is a serious emergency medicine that we need to save lives. This is like an EpiPen. So I hope you're all in agreement with this. And it's also become state law this year. That's why it's now in our policy. Any questions that I can answer? Or Jennifer, if you have anything you want to add, please do so.
Hey, Joanne,
no.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for this overview.
Sure.
And in understanding it the way I understand, EpiPens and application of it, why wouldn't we have this during school-sponsored field trips and events? Like in the example you mentioned, like a school dance happening on site, or a school day field trip.
Why wouldn't we have it there? Because the law says it has to be on school grounds.
Only.
So,
It can't.
yeah, we don't take this
Okay.
off school grounds. That's what the law says. But what we've expanded, for example, our security guards, our nurses are not there. So our security guards, if somebody is really in trouble, they can administer it. By the way, this medication is pretty much harmless. So if you gave it to somebody in their nostril, it really wouldn't do anything unless it would help the person come out of their coma that they're going into from an opioid. That's all it would do. It wouldn't hurt you in any way. So that's why it's really kind of easy for the layperson to give as well.
Got it.
You mentioned training.
Yes.
Everybody goes through training, or only those that want to have the training?
Okay, every school nurse and every single one of our subs go into training every single year. I mean, even though we know how to do this and we have procedural protocols, we still need to have everybody go through the training and sign off on it so that they're prepared. They also get a free Narcan, which in many cases they could either take home or they give it to the Board of Ed if they don't think they're going to need to use it. We keep all those trainings for quite a few years. I mean, I'm in charge here for the past 8 years. And I have every training that anybody has ever taken, including EpiPens, Diastat training, CHR training. I mean, nurses do a whole lot of training, and we have to have that documented because we want to make sure that everybody is well trained to be able to do this. Even though we are licensed by the state of Connecticut, we need to have those trainings. We've expanded it to security guards who want to do this. And I must say that our high school guys and women have been wonderful. They've taken the training. We have several teachers that have taken it, and principals as well. We can't mandate that other people do that, but our nurses are all trained, and all of our substitute nurses are trained for every building. And like I said, we've even expanded this to Sono, even though, you don't probably have children there that would be using fentanyl, but you just never know. It could be a parent, a staff member, could be anybody, could be the UPS man that comes in. You don't know,
Mhm.
and if we can save a life, that's what we want to do. That's what this is for.
Joanne, I just
Yes.
would like to commend you for making those good decisions a few years ago to have this available in so many schools, and then to just say, hey, every school, anyone that walks on the campus could be protected by this. My husband had cancer several years ago, and he took opioids to take care of that. And just like an interesting sideline, he took some of this, now, how do we pronounce it? Naloxone?
Fentanyl? Oh,
No.
naloxone
Naloxone.
or
Because-
Narcan. Yeah.
because one of the worst side effects of even a small amount of opioids, he had cancer for 5 or 6 years,
Oh, I'm sorry.
is constipation. And so when he took this, it helped tremendously.
Right.
So
right.
it's funny. The main reason is to save lives, but it can be used to just make life more comfortable.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
a sideline.
And it's
but
fairly harmless, this drug.
It's harmless too.
Yeah.
So that's I just am amazed and so happy that you all made those decisions and that we are protecting as many people as we can, because as you pointed out, innocently people can take this, and then of course on purpose people can take this. Either way, they're dying. And this literally can save their lives.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
If I may just make one comment, just getting back to the policy, there is some language in the policy about safe storage. And to your point, one of the other things that our department did to be proactive was to obtain safe medication boxes that could be easily identified, usually stored close to the main office and near the AED. So that way individuals would know where they could find the Narcan and have easy access to it, especially because it's intended to save lives. So, we went ahead to ensure that these boxes were installed in every building, so that way individuals knew where it could be found. So that's, another way that we tried to be proactive.
You can see them actually. They're silver boxes with a glass front, and they have a cross on it. And then inside has the naloxone, and it has, some paper and pencil and gloves and, masks and things like that we would need.
Mhm.
It's also locked. And we have the key to it, either on the top or on the side, that all principals and staff know. But honestly, we've really never had, and I thank God for this, we have had no issues with people opening them and stealing it. We were worried about it because it's right out in the open, just like the EpiPens. And we have never had a problem, thank goodness for that.
Good.
So
Very good.
we kind of don't play it up, if you know what I mean, with kids.
Right.
It's the staff that needs to know more so than anybody else.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great news. I'll probably go look for it this evening now, since
Yeah, please
we'll be out of
do.
school tonight.
Yeah.
But I also took a training on the Narcan, and that class was very eye-opening for sure.
Sure is. Thank you for doing that, Diana. It's important.
Yeah, people sometimes don't think about it because they say it's not me, not my family, not my
Right.
child, but
Yeah.
you could be anywhere.
That's right. You just never know.
Mhm,
And Hub is one of our partners,
mhm.
Margaret Watt, we're Positive Directions, and they offer the training for free. They have them all the time. They have them once a month, and it is open to the public. So anybody can
Yeah.
do this training.
Good to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Joanne.
You're welcome.
Wonderful work. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So our next policy is looking at some minor changes. The 4,000 policy, number B, under the review of policy changes, employees' use of district computers. The only changes that really occurred in this policy were updates to naming of things. So same thing that I mentioned earlier, like there's no more words like beepers or anything else of older technology. So it's really just been updated to that in that sense. They also make sure that it's very, very clear that there should be no any employee should understand that anything that they do on the computer can be tracked, that if it's one of our district computers. So really that's pretty much the basis of the policy. It's something we've had in place. We have in place for employees as well as students. It was just a technical update to their language to match that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on.
No questions, but I needed to make a comment. Janine Randolph has joined us for our minutes. Thank you.
I have a question, Ralph.
Yeah.
When computers or laptops are handed out to students, is that part of the introduction? Here you have a computer, but you've got to know anything you do on that can be traced. Is that said openly?
Yes. Yes, it is, definitely. And we actually have a responsible use policy that, we've been updating, and that's something that probably later this year we will update again. Our students in the VILS program actually have to, we have a record of them signing it. We also have an acceptable use policy that we track in Power School for students to sign as well, so that there's an awareness of how you're supposed to use computers, what they're used for, and that things are tracked. We also have, as we talked about in our security systems, when we did a presentation at the last board meeting, we do actually have systems in place that even tell the kids. So in some cases, if a student's typing something on a Google Doc, and they get it a lot where they type the word, if they're studying Dante's Inferno, let's say, and they type the word hell, they may end up getting a notice back to them that says, it's like, hey, you did something inappropriate, potentially, so that the student knows that they're actually typing. But in many cases, if it's something that's actually harm to self or harm to others, that goes directly to an administrator. But otherwise, yeah, we do track everything that goes on right now on these computers. I mean, that's just it's the world that we live in now. Yeah, and they are made aware of all of that.
You're muted.
I'm muted because the dog was barking. But yes, that's a key part, that they're aware, and that helps direct their behavior.
Yes. And we also actually, now one of the things we're doing with our coaches and our library media specialists is making sure that it's embedded in the curriculum. We actually have a digital citizenship curriculum at K-8 that we've been implementing last year and this year, and we'll continue to do that over the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. So if there's no other questions, Barbara, I'll turn it over to you for the next two.
Sure, absolutely.
Oh,
got a question.
Joanne.
Barbara, would you mind if Jennifer and I got off? I don't think we
have
need
a
to
problem
be
with
on the
that, Ralph.
rest. Unless, and you know what, just to the members of the board, if you ever have any questions about anything with nursing or any policies related to administration of medication, immunizations, anything, come by and see us. We're in room 333. We'd love to chat with you and show you what we have. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Anytime.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks.
Joanne.
Enjoy your night,
Thank
guys.
you very much,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So I'll pick up, Ralph?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And also just an FYI in terms of the district's computer use, we also let employees know here in HR when we do their onboarding that they really shouldn't have an expectation of privacy when they are using our platforms and emails. That was just a side note. Okay, so we're going to just briefly go over two changes that were to the sex discrimination and sex harassment policy. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll see. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let me just preface this with, these are changes that were made to the regulation, not to the policy itself, right? So just how we implement it. And this is regarding Title IX and sexual harassment. We could talk about Title IX all day long because there's so many different facets to it. But ultimately, the one change here on page 15, there are two ways that a Title IX sexual harassment complaint can be dismissed. It can be mandatory or permissive, but in any event, if it's going to be dismissed, the complainant, the person making the accusation, would need to notify the Title IX coordinator in writing that they want to withdraw any formal complaint. So I think they just the subsection, right? If we can see here. So that's minor. But then I want to go down to page 26. So if a matter is investigated pursuant to Title IX, Title IX changes were made so that there's more of a due process aspect to it. And one, if a complaint is filed and somebody wants to go forward with a complaint, we actually have to provide notice of what the allegations are to each party, the complainant and the respondent. So the regulation provided a template for the how to notify each party of the allegations, which is here. But we within the district already have a notice of sexual harassment template that we use because this is not a new requirement. This has been an ongoing. So this is a suggested template. And there are certain requirements. You need to identify who the parties are, and there needs to be some specificity as to what the actual incident was or incidents. And that's kind of just those changes.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody have any questions? Mary Ellen, I think you're on mute if you have.
Barbara, how is that a change? You said you're going to use the template that you designed rather than this template.
We have a template already that all of the Title IX coordinators use and have access to a bank, and then it has like the fillable portions in it. And I think this was just an addition to the Shipman and Goodwin policy, like an additional template that they provided for this regulation. But all of the components that are required legally are within our template. So I've kind of reviewed it. There's not really a substantial difference.
So just to be clear, what you're saying is you're going to kind of strike this one the one we're looking at away and put the one that you've been working with and designed in its place.
And we already have that bank created on our intranet for our Title IX coordinators and investigators and decision makers.
Okay, could I ask you more? How different is this policy compared to what we had before? Is it much fuller? Is it?
Actually, the policy itself is the same because it's been the Title IX is a federal statute, so we've had to comply with that no matter what. And I believe Shipman and Goodwin, before I came in, that policy was already enacted and the language is the same.
So could you just respond to the question again, maybe just in a different way? Did we already have a policy in place that was identical to the one that we're looking at?
Yes. For Title IX, yes.
For Title IX, that's just
Correct. I think she would probably understand better between the policy and the regulation, that the policy did not change, but there was a slight change in the regulation.
Correct.
In the template.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Diana.
So Diana, if I jump in then, and Barbara, correct me, then I may have actually made a mistake then the way that I posed this, because this isn't an adoption of a new policy. It's just an information around a change in regulation.
Okay. I'm hearing that now. I mean, you might have said it before, but I'm getting it now.
No, I
Nope.
don't think I was that clear about. I don't think I was clear about it. I don't know if Ralph was, but
No, that was my mistake in the way of actually posting it. So yeah.
And so let me stop sharing this document, and then the next one will be reports of suspected abuse or neglect of children or reports of sexual assault of students. So this is a policy that already existed, but there was a change to the state legislation. And so now the state requires, in addition to the DCF, right, Division of Children and Families, there's that state mandated reporter training that all employees have to do before they come into the district. Now there's going to be a second portion of it, which is identifying sexual abuse. And so the state is creating that, and we will have to implement it effective July of 2023. So let me just share my screen so you can see that.
So how long is the training now before adopting the
So
second
the
half?
DCF training, it depends, about like an hour to 2 hours, depending on how like slowly you read and go through, but it's online. So there's that, and there's a sexual harassment prevention training that the CHRO also we're required by law to do. Okay, so this is the abuse and neglect of students, right? And that falls under the Division of Children and Families. So there were some minor changes just about using gender neutral terms instead of him or her, the child.
Child. Mhm.
Right, and likewise for supervisors, instead of his or her, you know, gender neutral terms, commissioner, superintendent, building principal, which I think that's just a great and necessary change all around. So let's go to page. Okay, right. So this is the portion. Let's do one page. Let me zoom in a little. Everybody can see?
Yes.
Right. So we have to annually distribute electronically to all school employees regarding the DCF training and the guidelines specifically here that are going to go into effect regarding child sexual abuse, right? So then beginning July 1st, 2023, all school employees will have to complete the training, bystander training, and appropriate interaction with children training program. So again, that's not going to be from us. That's going to be from the state. And once the state releases it, we're going to have an obligation to have all employees complete this. So whether you're new into the district or our current employees, and that'll be something that we'll work on our end in terms of making sure that that happens and everybody uploads their completed certificates. Presumably they're going to have some sort of certificates because that's how DCF operates now. But that was a change in legislation this summer that's going to go into effect next summer.
Barbara, can you speak to what the change is? This just states there is a change, but what is the change?
So before, there was not a sexual abuse training component to DCF. So the state has now required DCF to create this new training for all mandated reporters.
So the policy has remained the same from the state. It's just the training has been tacked on.
Yes, it's a new training, exactly. Right, before the training was just in regards to abuse and neglect, identifying it, how to report it. Now there's going to be this new specific component about child sexual abuse and assault.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to go off topic, but I would like to bring up what the series of articles in the Norwalk Hour recently about locking children that have lost control, putting them in rooms or in some way holding them down. And today's episode, are you following me? Have you been reading that headline?
I mean,
The restraining the restraint and seclusion.
how to use restraints.
Yes.
And when
so
they're using them inappropriately, when it's not, yeah.
So there, at first I'm like, oh, another, knock to schools. But I started reading it and it's really a national issue. And today I was happy to see that they gave some solutions that look like they could be really very good. And I was just wondering if we have any policy about how to restrain students in our schools right now.
I believe we already do, right?
We do.
Only certain individuals who have gone through the
Training.
certified
correct.
training modality that we have in place are able to restrain when a kid is demonstrating crisis, as in what you alluded to in the article. I forget what it is that we use, the PMI.
CPI, you're exactly right, Godfrey.
There we go. Yes. So to answer your question, we've had a protocol in place, Mary Ellen, already, without getting into the particulars of each situation when it would be
of course, I've been in situations teaching for so many years. I have not restrained anyone, but I've been in situations where that has happened. And what they're proposing is something about focusing on comfort more than control, comfort for the person, the child who was losing control. So that's maybe for another time discussion, but perhaps I'll read what the policy is, but I'm happy to know that we have one.
Yeah.
And I know in general, Godfrey, you promotes this as does our superintendent, that we want to look for ways to help a child learn ways to control themselves and then to be able to be productive and not be punitive in our interaction with them if they are losing control.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I think
Thank you.
those were mine.
Yes.
If there's any other questions?
Barbara, is there anything in the state pertaining to documentation that they anticipate including in some of the policy changes for identifying victims of sexual abuse, or just even within what's expected to accompany a report of abuse or identification of sexual abuse?
Yeah, I would imagine so, right? And so I can say I was a former prosecutor. I dealt with domestic violence, not child abuse and sex crimes, but I did work a lot. Sometimes there would be a crossover. And I imagine that there's going to be really specific guidelines and training and outlines and information that they're going to provide to us that we can, post for our employees and also provide, because that is a very sensitive area. They have people who were trained specifically on how to conduct those interviews. So really, this is just a matter of what they're going to provide to us. And when I say they, I mean the state. They're going to provide to us, what to be on the lookout for.
Mm-hmm.
And best practices and issues like that. But I don't think it's going to be so much about sitting down with the student and following up and conducting, some sort of quasi interview.
And my ask comes from the place of being mindful of the activities, that take place following, suspicion of it, that lead to when the report is submitted. Knowing that teachers are, of course, mandated reporters, wanted to be mindful of our infrastructure. If there is documentation or what is expected of whom, I think it's an important piece, for us to be ahead of any way we can. That's simply where my question comes from.
Yeah, and so I can say for right now, what DCF does require is within 12 hours of somebody have reasonable cause to suspect or believe that there's abuse or neglect, that they have to either call the DCF care line for emergency situations or report it via the DCF portal, which is which is relatively new. I think it started this year for non-emergent situations. And then 48 hours after that, the person who made the report, the adult presumably, would have to submit a written report just explaining what happened. So those are already in place for DCF, and I imagine those are going to carry over to this.
Okay.
If that answers, if that was
it does. I just want to put on the radar. That's
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks, Ralph.
Janine. I don't know if Janine had any questions on this section.
No, I'm good. Thank you. It answered a lot of questions actually that I did have. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, great. Thanks, Barbara.
Thanks.
So the next couple of items are actually pretty straightforward. I think I had the easy ones this month. Retention of records is our next item. And basically, once again, this is actually identical to the changes that have been made in the earlier policies talking about computer use. They've just updated language. in there to explain that our retention policy with records, because we do have to hold on to records, by state statute, we keep our records for different ones for different periods of time. None of that's changed. It's just that they've changed the terminology in here to actually match more modern technology. So in the sense of email systems and archive systems online, instead of just talking about paper. So those were the only changes with that specific retention policy. And then finally, there were some minor changes to our 9,000 policies, which are our board bylaws, which we discussed earlier at your retreat. But we had the couple of them that were already incorporated. So this is more of an FYI because these were incorporated as of May. The bylaws focused on meeting conduct, time and place, posting of agendas, quorums, and minutes were all updated to include language that allows for virtual and hybrid meetings to occur. So in the past, we had some specific legislation that was passed that allowed us to do that through the pandemic. As of last spring, we were allowed to keep those policies in place permanently, which is why we can, once again, have meetings like we are currently online or have them in a virtual environment. So that really the only thing that changed in those policies is the addition of that virtual and hybrid meetings can occur for boards. And then finally, the last one was the removal of board officers. So that was just there is a policy, I can pull it up if you'd like, but there's just a process that's followed. And really it seemed like there was some repetitive language. So they really just kind of cleaned it up. There was nothing that was changed within the policy itself. It was just more of a clarification. They felt like they had said some things a few times and it just needed to be said once.
Ralph, could you say what is the policy for
Sure.
removing?
Yeah, hang on one second. I can actually pull it up for you.
I think Godfrey has his hand up too,
Oh,
right, Godfrey?
I do. It actually is a question for Barbara regarding what we just moved away from.
Okay.
Well, my question is about volunteers. When looking at where our mandated reporter policies extends to, does it include anything about volunteers who are in the school buildings or chaperoning trips? Any expectations of them to follow along our expectations for what employees need to be reporting and identifying?
Okay, so for our parents who kind of chaperone trips or stuff like that, do we tell them about DCF and mandated reporting? That's not a conversation we generally have with them, but remember, overall, everyone's being supervised by the staff members. So if the staff members see anything, and even if they see something with a parent, they have an obligation to report it.
And my question comes from, the current practices of other current nonprofits and being mindful of the activities that volunteers would be engaging with our kids, just in the sense of safeguarding,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any orientation to it or anything that's put in front of volunteers around, certain languages or things said that immediately needs to be directed to school personnel, but it's something worth being clear what we expect of volunteers, without getting into the variety of school-related activities they are involved in, an hour to 4 hours. I think it's worth being clear and being in front of if there's any expectations or any practices the state has talked about or we should be mindful of when looking at how we onboard volunteers.
We are very careful about volunteers and in what capacity they're coming into the district, especially if a volunteer is going to be, if it's more than just kind of like a one-off occasion. But I do think you bring up a good point. The DCF mandated reporter, that applies to school employees, not parents or volunteers, because remember, they're not technically our employees, but it's always good to provide that information to them so they know if they see something, who to say it to.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something we should, just carve out, being mindful of when, reporting of these situations or when they come to light isn't always in the prescribed way. The scenarios are written out in mandated reporter training.
I think that's a great suggestion, because our volunteers are a category that we try to be mindful of, parents' rights, but also the safety of other students that they're going to be around.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Ralph? Sorry.
No, definitely not at all. So let me get to let me jump back in. I mean, unless Godfrey, are you all set or you're?
Yes, I just was trying to lower my hand. Go ahead.
Sounds good. So this is actually the removal policy that we talked about. So there's actually a procedure that you would normally go through for if there was a rationale for the removal of a board member. Basically, the procedure is that if there's, depending on conduct in all the other bylaws, it can either be an open or executive session, a decision be made, and then there's a number of different steps that are followed between written notice, opportunities to be heard, and so forth.
Is there any conferring we have to do with, any of the town committees, Republican, Democrat, just around this as well?
Can you,
in terms of removing an elected official, being mindful that the school district isn't responsible for electing, persons in these board roles are elected, and just where those two things intersect, it is a gray area, and just worth being clear on whose procedures we go forward with.
You mean the procedure of replacing once that board member is removed?
Yeah, we said to be removing an elected official. So just the sense of, I don't know if that's a nuance or just what it brings to the conversation for how it, I don't know, it may contradict.
I believe it actually would follow whatever our city charter is for the replacement. So similar to, and unfortunately with the late Mr. Barbas, the same idea of like how we would follow the idea of actually replacement. But when it comes to this is really specifically on the removal of a board member. But I can try and find a little bit more information specifically and follow up on if there's anything that we need to be aware of from the city side that would be different on, once again, the process. And
my point is to make sure it doesn't conflict, with the activities we are going to carry out. And in the example you referenced, I don't think there was a conclusion that was brought about when there was a discussion of removing Mr. Barbas. He was never removed.
Yeah, no, yes, exactly. Yeah. But I was referring to the, like they said, the appointment of something afterwards. This is specifically just for removal. But yeah, what I will do is I will follow up to make sure that, if there's anything we need to look at in regards to our own city charter, if there could potentially be a conflict. But I do know that the way this policy is written is to be more broad-based, to make sure that we just have pieces in place, that there's actually steps that have to be followed.
So Ralph, are these steps, we're looking at a lot of things, and I'm just asking, is this from the state, or is this the steps from the state. This isn't our own policy.
No, this is our board policy. Yes. These procedures are part of our board policy.
They're part of our board policy, but when were they written? Are they part of what we've just adopted?
Yes.
Keeping up to date with the state
Yes.
new things.
Yes. Correct.
So previous to our adoption this summer of this one, are they what we had before? Is it very similar to this, or is there? You're saying it's about the same?
Yes. No. There was processes in place for removal. I'd have to go back and actually see what the change was. Once again, this was the ones that were adopted with the new model policies, and there
Right.
were just some updates that were made to it, which was it. So we had actually already adopted this. They had actually just clarified the language in exactly what you're looking at right now, so that they felt like there was some pieces in there that were somewhat repetitive. So
Oh, okay, that's what you were saying before.
exactly. So
And
cleared-
you're saying they is the
Shipman and Goodwin
Shipman
actually
and Goodwin.
actually clarified their own language in the policy that we had already adopted.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's like we're looking at these little dolls within dolls within dolls, so like, okay, so we're talking about the policy that we originally had, or we're talking about the policy from the legislature and from Shipman. Okay, so
Yeah.
I think I'm with you.
I do think though that so with that, Diana, I don't know if there's any more questions on that, but if
No, I am good. Don't know if anybody else has any questions. Also being mindful of time.
Yeah.
So that we can all rush to the workshop. Is everyone okay? Any other questions?
I'm
on
okay with
Good on that.
anything that we discussed this evening? Okay. All right.
so,
So,
Diana, if I could, so next the next December meeting, what we plan on doing is we've now actually completed what we wanted to do with the adoption of the new policies, as well as the updates that happened, the annual updates. So I believe Barbara has what we'll send out soon to you a little bit more information, but Barbara has some policies she wanted to start reviewing now on the in the 3000 of what's that?
Yeah. On the personnel side.
Personnel side that we'll do in December. And our goal, I think, is to actually have the grading policy by January. So those would be the next two meetings that we would have. Now we'll get into a normal process, and those dolls within dolls of the policies that we
Thank
looked at. We've actually just gone. Hopefully we've put them into place now, so that shouldn't be happening moving forward anymore. Now that we've
sounds
adopted.
good.
So.
Sounds good. We'll get back on to our regular scheduled program.
Yes, and most likely we will bring up using force with children. What to be current on what we are doing and what some of the best practices are now. That will be a discussion as we move forward.
That'll be a different, yeah. We'll bring
Next,
those up.
as we go into next year.
Correct. All right, with all of that being said, and a good informative evening, I'd like a
Thank you, Barbara.
motion to move
Thank
all
you,
of
Ralph.
these policies to the full board.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Mary Ellen, seconded by.
Second,
Thank you, Janine. All in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it's unanimous. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been very interesting. Learned a lot today, and
I
I'm
learned a
sure
lot.
we'll be moving forward now with policies. And Barbara, I'll be calling you, and we can sit and make that appointment.
Sure,
All
absolutely.
right.
Okay.
Okay. So time is now 6:01. Thank you to everybody, and we'll see you in a bit. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.